Prima Media's Mining Weekly is interviewing James Campbell, the CEO of Botswana Diamonds PLC, a diamond exploration and project development company that holds exploration licenses in Botswana and in South Africa. James, the lack of exploration in South Africa is worrying. Yet Botswana Diamonds seems to be going great guns in South Africa at Thorny River and Marsfontein. Was it difficult to obtain prospecting rights? And what are the promising indications of your exploration in South Africa so far?
Martin, we are able to work with the DMR. We are able to work with the systems that the government has in place, but it does take a great deal of work to get it done. What is important to mention, Martin, is, and you said it in your introduction, we're a junior. So juniors go to places which are highly prospective, but are difficult places to work. We've operated across the whole of Africa. I ran a company called West Africa Diamonds in Sierra Leone just after the war. So we go to places and we know and acknowledge that it's hard work to get things done, whether it's the bureaucracy, whether it's the deep sand of the Kalahari in Botswana, whether it's just coming out of a war in Sierra Leone. We see these as opportunities. And that's why we believe South Africa, which has got fantastic infrastructure, although it is crumbling a little bit, is a great place to be because of its high prospectivity.
Do you foresee your exploration in South Africa transitioning to mining one day?
Martin, we absolutely hope so. We've applied for 2 mining permits on the Thorny River project already, and we're in the process of applying for a water use license. We've done considerable geological work, bulk sampling, microdiamond work, drilling, mineral chemistry, you name it. And we believe that the kimberlites, which are east of Marsfontein in what we call the Thorny River project, are commercial, and then why we've applied for a mining permit. And the mining permit, I believe, is almost a unique form of legislation when I look at the different regulations throughout Africa. Most of Africa, it's a mining license or nothing. And a mining permit is designed for juniors, for small-scale miners, and it's a really neat piece of legislation which allows companies like ours to commercially exploit small deposits over a shorter period of time.
In your concluding remarks during a recent presentation, you spoke of the need to be able to access geological information in South Africa at zero cost. How much is charged currently? And how does this compare with the situation in, say, Botswana and other African countries?
Martin, it's a very, very good question. I'm blessed to having spent considerable time in South Africa, many decades, in fact. And so as a result of that, I've worked here for many years, and I've got a very deep network across South Africa. So I can get information from colleagues and friends and such like. But if you are a new entrant into the business in South Africa, you will not find a central repository of information. If I use the Botswana example, if you go to the Geological Survey of Botswana, you can find files going back many, many, many decades of quarterly reports submitted by mining and exploration companies on that particular prospecting license. So you can sift through those. And then with your insight and with your knowledge of the current world, you can see whether areas are prospective or not. In our country, sadly, there is no requirement for submission of geological data. There is a requirement for submission of compliance or environmental data on a regular basis, but that's not of much help for explorers who are looking to discover a new deposit. So essentially what we need is we need a system whereby we submit regular reports, whether they're quarterly or 6 monthly, and we need a repository where these reports are all publicly available. And in fact, most countries in Africa, from memory, actually have this. The DRC has it, Zimbabwe has it, Botswana has it, Namibia has it. It's not a complicated thing to put together. And I think it's quite a large barrier to entry for newcomers coming into South Africa.
So is that more than you just get from the cadastre, or if we had a functioning cadastre system, would you get what is needed?
Yes, a functioning cadastral system would allow people like myself to look at what licenses are available and then swiftly apply for a licensing system. Now, the cadastral system is very clunky using IT technology. I can quickly zoom onto the Botswana one. It's high tech, and I can see what licenses are available, who has got other licenses. I can't do that in South Africa. So it's a slightly separate thing, but most functioning countries in this area, such as Canada, they link the cadastre through to the back office system where you can actually access historical information in terms of a data archive. Because after all, the base should be a GIS, or a geographical information system, and sitting below that should be a document repository with all the historical information. But that would mean that you'd have to have scanned all the historical information from scratch, which many countries have, by the way.
So what you have put forward is that, once licenses are terminated or expire, the companies that have gathered data should then make that available to, in South Africa's case, the DMRE.
Yes and no, Martin. There's quite a big argument going on about intellectual capital, in that, yes, when you've actually finished your license, and I firmly believe in the use it or lose it. So if you're not going to actually pursue a license through to the ultimate form being a mining license, you should submit your closure report with all the data actually sitting in it. And then other companies can apply for it. I am not keen at all in terms of submission of very detailed data until the licenses has been concluded, because it could be used by others. And after all, in my area of being an explorer, you have data, you have knowledge, and then you have insight. And each of these three are the major competitive advantages which explorers have. But yes, when you finish with the license, you should submit the data and the report, and it should sit in a central repository. But more importantly as well, is you should be submitting those regular reports to ensure that you're working on the license. And if you're not working on the license, it should be taken away. And it should be given to other people who have the technical capability and financial capacity to actually work the license.
What else needs to be done to ensure that South Africa hits this very lofty target it's set for itself of attracting 5% of global exploration investment in the next 5 years? What else needs to be done? What about training people, and what about the actual efficiency of departments, etc.?
I think that there are two parts to that, Martin, aside from what we've already spoken about in terms of the cadastre and back office system. The first one is to simplify the legislation. Often investors, and these investors, by the way, chiefly come from Europe, Canada, or Australia, like to see a simple piece of legislation. And if the legislation and regulations are very complicated, they'll bin it, and their investment dollar will actually go elsewhere. My chairman has got a great saying. He said, a dollar is an orphan. It'll find its own way home. And we need to make sure it finds its home here. So we need to drastically simplify the system in order to make it easier for explorers to operate. The second part is to financially incentivize explorers to operate. In Canada, you have a flow-through share scheme. UK and Australia have got similar schemes whereby private investors can put money into exploration stocks and get a tax advantage because of it. In summary, simplify the legislation and create some form of tax incentive to allow South African high net worth individuals to invest in exploration companies. But the only way you do that is by giving them a tax advantage. And therein, that's why 99.9% of the exploration spend is coming from Canada, the UK, and Australia in South Africa. But the base, as we discussed at the very beginning, is having a functioning cadastral system and a strong document repository of geological information which others can access.
And what, on the private sector side, can the JSE, for instance, do to support junior explorers?
I think, Martin, what they can do then is they've got to deregulate the area for retail investors. You know, what with the increasing bureaucracy and risk management we have in the world at the moment, it is very difficult for retail investors, which after all are the lifeblood of explorers, to invest in junior stocks. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is education. If you go to London, if you go to Toronto, if you go to the main Australian bourses, you've got fund managers who understand the concept of exploration. When I go to a fund manager here, they ask me for cash flow. I say, I'm an explorer. I will potentially give you a growth stock. Very much like we did in African Diamonds, where we provided a 25 times return to our foundation investors. So I think it's two things. I think it's deregulation to help the retail investor. And then secondly, education in terms of the mining analysts and fund managers, in terms of how do you assess an exploration stock.
And getting back to government then, when it comes to exploration, how important is consistency and predictability and stability?
Martin, those are absolutely crucial, because that's what an investor looks at. You're already in a high-risk environment when it comes to exploration anyway. So you need the regulatory environment to be stable and predictable. If I use the Botswana example at the moment, many of the officials in Botswana have been trained at top mining universities, such as McGill. The Minister of Mines in Botswana is a young man. He's in his 40s. He's got a Bachelor's of Engineering from McGill and a Master's in Mining Engineering from WITS. He's worked in senior management positions in gold, copper, and diamonds from memory. So they've got a very strong cadre, I'm using that in its proper English term, of mining specialists who work within the department. And there's plenty of room for growth as far as I can see in terms of the DMRE and the kind of people they can employ to put into those senior leadership positions.
Finally, what in your view should be the biggest takeaway from this interview?
The biggest takeaway, Martin, is that juniors go where others fear to tread. South Africa is highly prospective. It's got lots of work to be done. And being an explorer and being a half full kind of person, I see that it will improve. It's up to the likes of people like myself and many of my colleagues to actually gradually nudge it along to actually help it improve. But we believe there's a strong future here, and we'll continue to work with all interested stakeholders to actually realize that.
That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, speaking to James Campbell, the CEO of Botswana Diamonds, a company listed in London and Botswana.